So welcome everybody to the Safer Dance lunchtime session on information sharing. My name's Imogen Knight and I'm a committee member along with Peter Flew, I'm happy to introduce you to here as our chair. And we'd like to run the session because we know that receiving an allegation against a dance teacher, a volunteer or a guest can be a very difficult situation for anyone involved. And while everybody would like to do the right thing to protect the children and adults in their care from harm, people have genuine worries about what they can and cannot share and who with. So this lunchtime conversation is for everybody to hear advice on the topic and to hear some research and thinking that we have done and would like to share with you, and to allow you or enable you to ask questions of us. Safer Dance is a voluntary working group made up of nearly 100 members now across a wide variety of dance, education and safeguarding organisations. And if you look above Peter's right shoulder, you can see the website link, and much more information and some free resources can be found there. We welcome new members to add your voice and your energies to our mission to support the dance sector to embrace good safeguarding practice effectively. So Peter is going to be our guru today and is going to explain the work and the thinking that we have done. And he will explain why did we do this piece of work now, and I will hand over directly to him. We will also, after Peter explains that, we have created a series of scenarios that we thought might be helpful to start the conversation with you all and to give you some examples in practice of how we think that different situations might be handled. But then after that, we'd like to open up to anybody to ask any questions that you specifically might wish to be answered. So Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Imogen, and welcome everybody. So towards the end of last year, I was approached by one of the CEOs of one of the awarding organisations to see if we could put together a session for CEOs to have a discussion about what to do if there is an allegation against a dance teacher and how much that allegation can be shared around and what the protocols should be. And this wasn't an area that we tackled before at Safer Dance. So I convened a meeting on January the 19th with the relevant CEOs. We had some principals from major dance schools, private vocational dance schools, and we had representatives from the Lado community, including Steve Hall, who is the lead of the National Lado Network, and we had 2 or 3 other Lados there as well. So we had a very full conversation where we unpicked what to do if there's an allegation. I wrote the notes up for that meeting and sent it to the members of Safer Dance later in January, early February. Kathy Taylor, who I can see is on the call from the DVS, has been really helpful on checking my homework to make sure that the details I put about allegations are correct. And we created an information sharing guidance document, which can be found on the website there. If you just go to that address, scroll down a bit, it's the first item on the web page. So you might want to look at that and download it now and have a look at it, but that resource is there available for everybody. So I'll try and paraphrase a bit of it, but I think there isn't much in the way of scenarios in there. So this is where we can really unpick things as well. And if Kathy spots me doing anything wrong, then please put it in the chat and we will notice and I can be rectified, because I'm trying to pull things together rather than being the oracle myself on this. So I think the key findings that I think it's important to share is that your Lado is the most important person you can talk to. They are very willing to take even the details of who it's the allegations against. They're very happy to take a phone call to say, what do I do in this situation? And they will be able to share the information for you. So the Lado is always your first port of call as a DSL of one organisation. If you're a teacher, then it's important that if you're not the DSL, you go to the DSL, the designated safeguarding lead, and report in accordance with your safeguarding policy and practice. If you hear an allegation, you report it to your DSL. If you are a small dance school and you are the DSL, then you can go to advice from LADO. You can also go to advice to the awarding associations, so be it the ISTD, the RAD, or any other dance organisation. They will be able to give you advice because they will have their own safeguarding policies and procedures. But the LADO is the key person. Now, sometimes you must tell the LADO. So we're in a world where there is soon going to be something called mandatory reporting for child sexual abuse. We're not there yet, but there is still a legal compulsion to say if you are a provider of education and you had notification that a person has behaved in a way toward a child which raises concerns regarding their suitability to work with children, or they've harmed a child, or they've committed a criminal offence against a child, then you must tell your local LADO. That is imperative, and your safeguarding policies and procedures should put that clearly in there. It's also important to note that you have a legal responsibility if you conduct regulated activity to tell the DBS if you suspend or dismiss somebody over certain acts. So look at the document because it's quite complicated and detailed what those acts are. But it's important that you do report somebody to the DBS if the need arises. So please look at that in the document. And I think that the third thing that we want to talk about really is about, well, you've reported it to the LADO, you reported it to the DBS. Shouldn't I tell anybody else who knows who this person is? And that's where we really want you to be careful, because if you share allegations which are not proven, then you are going to be opening yourself up to allegations of misusing data. So, and that's also within the same organisation. So you don't want gossip to fly around all the dance teachers if you've heard an allegation. So be very, very careful. The Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, they have very clear rules about sharing information. So be really clear what you can and can't share. So those are the three real key messages to come out of the document and to discuss today. Always contact the LADO if you're at all worried. You have a legal responsibility to contact your LADO if you think a child's going to be harmed or has been harmed. You have a legal responsibility to report the DBS if you've removed someone from regulated activity. And be very careful about sharing details otherwise. That's a summary. Imogen, should we go through some scenarios?
That's great. Thank you, Peter. I think it's helpful always to remember the need to know basis. Always, it's a useful self-check in ordinary language, not safeguarding language, to say, right, okay, who needs to know and why does this person need to know? That's kind of helpful, isn't it? And I don't know about you, but I've always found that the ICO and the LADOs are really, really helpful when you phone up and they're very happy to rehearse hypothetical scenarios and to offer that support to make that more comfortable for you and to help you find your way through if you are the person that has to handle this. All right, Peter, let's give you the first scenario. So I would just like to say, actually, here, remind everybody that this is being recorded and we will place this recording up on the Safer Dance website so that people can dip back in afterwards. And anybody that's missed it, or if you want a colleague to record it or see it, then you can ask them to find this here in due course. So you are a dance teacher and you see something that concerns you in your dance school. Something perhaps a colleague or a superior has said or done. And what do? You report. So I might not just say any more than that. I might leave that there. What do you do, Peter?
What do you do? So you're a dance teacher and you're a bit worried about another dance teacher and what you've seen or what you've heard. The important thing to do is, hopefully, you should have been safeguarding trained, so you know any hint that there is something wrong, you tell your designated safeguarding lead, and it's their responsibility to take it further. So if you are the designated safeguarding lead yourself, you will follow your policy. And you will generally, and I would when I was a DSL, I will phone the LADO for advice. I will say, are you worried about this? Have you heard about this person? Is it something that I need to report? Does it go over a threshold? Now, there is a phrase called low-level concerns, which Steve, the chief Lado, doesn't like that phrase at all. It only appeared in one government document and is now everywhere, because every concern is a concern, but that there will be a threshold at which the Lado thinks that they can act. And that will be unique to the situation. So listen to the advice of the Lado. If it's something that say, actually, we recommend you speak to the person about their conduct and behaviour, but it isn't of a seriousness level that we think we want to take further, you still follow your procedures as a safeguarding lead, as far as recording the allegation, making sure that those records are secure. And if it's something that would need some disciplinary action to follow, then you follow your procedures. If you're a sole dance teacher and you've had a guest choreographer come in and you're worried about them, what do? Well, you may feel vulnerable, but definitely go to the Lado for advice. If the Lado says, well, that's not serious, you have a responsibility yourself to say, should I hire that person again? But, and this is where the information sharing comes in, it's an unfounded allegation. You could investigate yourself and say, we won't use this person again, and that will be written down. If you are somebody who is a membership organisation, say, and you remove their registration having followed your policies, that's a statement of fact you can tell other people if they ask. But be very wary about pronouncing on WhatsApp to all your dance school friends that don't touch this choreographer because I had an allegation against them, because you'll be opening yourself up. Now, as somebody who created Safer Dance to protect children and adults at risk, that's a really worrying thing to say, is don't tell people. If you told the Lado, they're the people that are going to decide whether it's serious, needs to be taken further. You have to look after your own business and say to somebody, okay, we won't work with you. Personally, it would be good to have the conversation with the person who's had the allegation, particularly if it's low level, because it could be a behaviour that they don't know is no longer appropriate. So, Imogen, is there anything else you think we should look at that?
Yes, I think that potentially difficult conversation is always worth having, because perhaps in this scenario, you've seen it, perhaps someone else has seen something and they're talking to you about it, or perhaps you've both seen the same thing, but you interpret it differently. Because quite often, especially when it's low level, none of these things are black or white. They're in the shades of grey, and you need to think carefully and listen. But having that conversation with the individual to talk about this behaviour and that bothered you slightly, could we unpack that together, is probably the best way to go forward.
Thank you. I think it's also important to realise that the Lado, if it's a local Lado, will know names of people if names have cropped up more than once. So yes. Even though it's low level, the Lado may well think that there's somebody that they need to worry about because there are so many low level comments coming through to them as well. So that's up to Lado to see whether they wish to take it further. It's also important when you talk to a Lado is that if you know that person works in other organisations or with other organisations, tell the Lado where they work. The Lado isn't a repository for allegations. That's the DBS's job. And Steve was quite clear that they're not going to send this message out to all the Lados in the country. But what they will do is, if they know that this person also works for the dance school in the next local authority, they will contact that local authority's Lado team to say, have you heard of this person? We've had this allegation. So they will do that sort of information sharing for you. And I think that's one of the other key messages is, don't spread the allegations yourself. Let the Lado tell the right people as well. What you could also do is that if somebody's made an allegation and you know that person works with other dance schools or other organisations or other awarding bodies, it sounds a bit odd thing to say, the person that makes the complaint, you can tell them, I can't tell a different organisation because I'm not allowed to share that information while it's unproven. You have a right to make a complaint to every organisation you think that person works for, if you know them. And then it'll mean that everybody has to make an investigation if they want to, but it means that you've told everybody and you can rest assured that at least that's being looked at, I would say.
Yes. And I think that's also difficult because not everybody belongs to an awarding body or a membership organisation in dance. So it isn't always easy, which is why the role of the LADO is so important. And LADOs learn as well about these dance scenarios, which are a bit different perhaps to the usual scenarios that are coming through across their desks more regularly. And it's helpful to the LADOs to understand what these things look like in a dance studio.
Yes, and that's one of the benefits of Safer Dance, because we are talking to LADOs, explaining them what it's like in a dance school, because safeguarding training is safeguarding training, and there's very little specific dance safeguarding training. For those who are new to Safer Dance, if you go onto our website and our resources, we do have a little 15-minute video I did, which is basically taking your normal safeguarding training, assuming you've already done it, and just going through a little bit of context for dance as well. So I encourage you to look at that.
All right, next scenario, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Just before we do this, I'll just remind the participants that if you have questions of your own, please do ask them in the Q&A box, because we will ask these as well and bring them out for everybody if you have them, so that we can share that. So please be anonymous and keep this a safe space. Right, Peter, if someone is under investigation by an association, but you use their membership number to enter them for exams, what do you do?
Yes, that's a problem, isn't it? So sometimes a dance school will have one person who's a registered teacher in a dance school, and they only need one, which is cost effective. You only have one person registered teacher, but everybody's entering examinations under that person's name. If that person is under investigation, gets suspended, you won't be able to run exams through that person. So that's really a risk to your business. So consider whether you, I mean, obviously nobody thinks anybody's going to be having an accusation against them, but it's just a reminder that there are other consequences of somebody having allegation against them, because of course a dance association will not pronounce on it quickly. If the policy says to suspend somebody immediately while an investigation is going on, you've lost a part of your business. So just be aware and look at your dance association's policies for member complaints, see whether you need to spread your risk for having more than one person who has that.
Yes, there will, of course, usually with the member organisations be a policy of no detriment to candidates. So if anybody's already in the pipeline, the association will place the benefit or the child or the children or the candidate's welfare at the centre of that decision-making process, even in the case of a suspension as well. So I think that will get dealt with individually. But let's move quickly on to the next one, because I think this next question comes naturally straight off your answer here, Peter, which is, if someone has made a malicious allegation about you as a teacher, what can you expect? And perhaps what can you do, and what questions should you ask, and where can you go?
Yes, I think it's important to realise that thinking about the abuse of children and adults at risk, it's very rare that a child will disclose something which is not true. So we need to start with believing the child. But if it's an allegation from somebody else that you feel may be malicious, it could be to do with a competitor, it could be because you haven't chosen a child for a particular dance event, or it's important that any allegation is investigated by the person that's been complained to. So that's really, really important. And if you feel that it is malicious, your best defense is to have evidence of what you do, so be open and transparent. So do you have a policy of how you select children for various things? Do you have a note documenting why you do that? So would it show this is why I chose that person? Is it everything? Is it transparent? Does everybody know how much they're held accountable for the decisions they make as a dance teacher? So that could be a reason for a malicious. If there is a malicious allegation against you that you know is patently untrue, then the best thing to do is to check the disciplinary policies of your association, check the processes that they have to go through, because there should be some strict timescales as to when they have to investigate that and what they do. Find a supporter who can, find evidence that can disprove the claim if you have it. I know some dance teachers have CCTV, but that doesn't normally have sound as well.
And people who can evidence your general pattern of behaviour.
Yeah.
So is this allegation normal? I mean, would that sound like your normal behaviour, or does that not sound normal? And who could testify to that over time?
Yeah. Now, obviously, if it's a serious allegation that isn't just the association but goes to the LADO, then that will be investigated more thoroughly. So it's not a question of just somebody within a dance organisation conducting an investigation which has a lower threshold than the law, because it will be whatever threshold is that it says in their policy, because a dance organisation is an autonomous person that can withdraw accreditation whenever it wants to, really, in accordance. And the last thing you want is a dance teacher to have to go to a judicial review, which is a very expensive thing to do, to actually overturn an organisation's policies. So I think the worrying thing is if you have a good reputation, if you have good evidence to how good you are as a teacher, keep that evidence, keep it recorded, make sure anything that could be seen as controversial is well documented and done by policy. So, I'm a former teacher. I didn't have favourites in the classroom. No teacher should have favourites. So it's important that every decision is open and transparent, I think so. Anything else you can add, Imogen, as a dance teacher?
And I think if we all have to have uncomfortable conversations from time to time, and we make decisions as teachers that parents or students themselves perhaps disagree with. And as teachers, we're human and we can get things wrong, not from any malicious intent, but because we can get things wrong from time to time. And I think it's always good to make sure that you receive the feedback and thank people for giving you that feedback. And there's some diffusion of such tense situations. But if you do have a difficult conversation, or if you have to go to a difficult place with something, I think as a general rule, it's always helpful then to if there was no one else there in the room or party to that conversation, it's helpful to write that conversation down and send it to someone, or reflect it back to the person you had it with and say, I would just like to reiterate what we both said today, and that we both agree that this is what took place. Because if nothing else, it shows that you are being transparent and you are trying to make an honest account.
Thank you. And it's also important to go back to the first principles of safeguarding training, is that you don't get yourself in a situation where you're one-to-one with a child in a room with a closed door that nobody can see in. So make sure that that it is possible for people to look at your sessions, etc. Don't hang around places where children are changing. As a male primary teacher, I was very conscious that I'll be perceived differently, quite correctly, I'd say. And so I was very careful when any children getting changed that there was a teaching assistant in the room for little children, and I wasn't in the room, but still trying to supervise. So just consider your own protection that any good safeguarding training will explain to you as well, to prevent allegations. Thank you.
So we have a question from an attendee, so I'll read that out, Peter.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm interested in what you can do if you hear whispers about a teacher in an adult dance class. Predatory behaviour outside of the class, for example, with people that they meet inside the class. Adults can be vulnerable, but not considered officially adults at risk. And if you can't evidence it within the class, what can you do?
That's a very good question. We work very closely with the Anne Craft Trust, which is the leading safeguarding organisation in England for adults. And that's not just adults at risk. It's important that everybody has safeguarding policies for adults, whether they are deemed adults at risk, which means that there's certain characteristics and ways that they could be abused. So we have one's answer to this one. Sorry. looking at the question. Oh, there it is.
Let me here they go.
It moved to answers, so there you go. I couldn't see it anymore. So if you hear a rumor about an adult, it's important that if there's a dance class, that they have a safeguarding policy. And a safeguarding policy shouldn't really only apply to children. The good practice is to have an adult safeguarding policy and a children's safeguarding policy. That's the advice from the Anne Craft Trust, because they are similar, but they're different enough that a policy gets very messy. So it's about, so if you have an adult safeguarding policy, does it cover supporting vulnerable people who have needs, not necessarily to the extent that they need to be classed as adults at risk, so they can't make their own decisions. But if somebody has a need that they need to have a way to disclose it, you have a need, you should, as a dance teacher, be able to adapt your teaching to make sure they feel included. If somebody is struggling with their mental health, your teaching style should be in such a way that people feel supported and get what they want out of a dance class. So if you hear whispers about a teacher, and you should go to that dance schools or dance classes safeguarding policy and talk to the safeguarding lead, even if they don't have an adult safeguarding policy, which I would suspect most don't. And if you don't feel that you get anywhere, see who that dance teacher is registered with and have a conversation with the people they're registered with. Or if there's no organisation that they're a member of, because you don't really have to be if you're just teaching adult dance class, phone up your local LADO. Just type into Google LADO, your local authority, sorry, Hampshire, Cambridgeshire, that sort of thing. So yes, it's really good, important that it isn't just people who are considered adults at risk. Everybody should be treating everybody else well and catering for their needs as well. So hopefully that's answered what you do.
All right. Next question, Peter. If the legal duty to refer to the DBS applies when you take someone out of regulated activity, how does this duty apply to membership organisations who neither put their members into regulated activity nor take them out of regulated activity? It's a really good point. The member can carry on teaching regardless of any action we might take regarding their membership, and because they're members, they're not employees.
No, that's right. So what the organisation needs to do is to make sure their policies say that if you're a member and your right to regulated activity has been removed by the DBS, then we automatically invoke our policies, which is our disciplinary policies. So you need to make sure that is a condition of your membership. Which I assume that if you're teaching children, you'll have an enhanced DBS check with a barred list check. And so therefore, yes, thank you, Kathy, in the chat. Even if the legal duty to refer does not apply, you can still refer for safeguarding reasons as well. So I would say make sure that the organisation has a clear link to having a DBS. One of the things that we did discuss at the meeting was the fact that there's no expiry date for a DBS. It is a snapshot on a particular day. So therefore, it doesn't expire. People say every 3 years. My employer says I need to do it every 3 years, but that's not a legal number. It's just a common usage number. I ask my trainee teachers because I work in teacher training, to declare every year whether they've had any convictions, whether there's anything which would appear on a DBS check if we redid it, and we don't really want to pay every year to do it, so that they self-declare. So associations may think about having self-declarations when they're in new membership, that there's been nothing on that. And of course, if they lie on that, then that's a way to remove them from membership as well. So yes, as Kath said, even if it is a legal duty to refer, it doesn't apply because they're not in DBS regulated activity anymore. You can still make sure that someone's referred for safeguarding issues too. So my advice for an organisation, any association, is to make DBS really linked to having membership, particularly if they're in a regulated activity with children, and keep track of that by asking for what do we call it?
Self-declarations.
Self-declaration form.
And also, as we know, if you if you're not sure, then speaking to the DBS and getting some advice is a really good start, because the DBS are really lovely, right, Kathy? And will endeavour to support the right action at the right time.
And Kathy's put in the chat that it is illegal for anyone who is barred to undertake regulated activity. So if you are aware that someone is barred, everybody should inform the police. The problem we have is that it may be illegal, but if somebody doesn't notice or somebody doesn't tell the police, then it doesn't go any further. So it is illegal for you to engage in regulated activity if you are barred.
Yeah, and I would say that you know, I have a school, and I myself, I obviously do this myself, but I also ask my colleagues to fill in a simple declaration annually at the start of the year. It's really, really simple. You just say, yep, I'm fit to work, and I haven't, I'm not on the barred register, and I, haven't undertaken any inappropriate actions, etc. And it's just a really good way of recommitting to teaching well.
Yeah, thank you.
So Peter, we've got a bonus question here. There aren't any more in the Q&A just at the moment. Are you happy for me to go for that?
Yeah, go now.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have made a complaint about the teacher of my child. What do I expect the school to do? And are any organisations that they're members of, what will they do? And what happens if it's below the LADO threshold? So we've touched on this already, but this is from the view of the parent. So just taking ourselves out of our teacher's shoes and looking at it from their point of view now.
So if you're a parent, what you would expect is that dance school has a policy to handle complaints. And it should go hand in hand with a safeguarding policy. So the safeguarding policy will explain, it will define what safeguarding issues are. It will have the definitions, it will talk about the training, and it will talk about the procedures that school will do. So if I raise a complaint, there will probably be a complaints policy. So this is a little tip to make sure you have a complaints policy, and then you follow your policy. Now, if you're a member of an awarding organisation, if you're an RAD registered teacher, then you have the right as a parent to complain to the RAD, say there is something wrong with this member, I've made a complaint and it wasn't resolved. So I would expect the school to treat it seriously, listen, to do a proper investigation. So to listen to you, to make notes, have notes that you can agree that those were the notes for the meeting. I would also expect the school to have a conversation with the person that you're making an allegation about, not with you, but have a separate one, and for that to be part of their investigation. Because what we don't want is to tell the parents that no, there's no way that person did that, and that's the end of the investigation. So do a proper investigation. Make sure that is recorded internally and kept secure so that nobody can hear about it. And then the organisation make a decision in accordance with its complaint policy as to whether any action should be taken, and it should have a set series of sanctions that the organisation can do. If you are a small dance school and it's a one-person dance school with only one employee, then I would ask the parent to contact the awarding organisation. Now, of course, if there isn't an awarding organisation, it's a freelance dance teacher who isn't entering exams, doesn't have to be a member of any organisation, then it will be a question of telling the LADO, your local LADO, I've got a complaint about this teacher. If you feel that that there needs to be a report to the DBS, anyone can report to the DBS. So look at the links in the document. If you think that that they've done something which has harmed a child, then you can refer to the DBS as well. If it comes back from the DBS to the LADO to say, actually, that's below the threshold, yes, it isn't nice that somebody shouted at my child, but that is not enough to make me think that I need to take it any further, then it's really a question of you having that conversation with the dance teacher, and then you would withdraw. I would say you would withdraw yourself from the dance teacher. The worry with the parent is that that parent will, and I know parents will because it's natural, will tell all of their friends that this happened. And that is a dangerous thing to do, to pass on your views of an allegation to other people because of the Oh, Lado doesn't take complaints from the parents public. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks, Dawn. So what does, sorry, can I let Dawn speak, actually? I know Dawn's a Lado. Dawn, I've let you, are you available to have a conversation about this?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm in a private room, so I'm fine.
So what should a parent do if it's somebody who is simply a single freelance dance teacher and they have
Yeah, that's the problem we have, Peter. As we said in our meeting before, that's always a difficult one for Lados as you say, for parents. I mean, I think you've given the right advice in terms of that dance school owner, because we have this all the time, should still have a safeguarding policy, should have a complaints policy within their organisation. They don't always, but they should have. So it would be a complaint. If the complaint is about the owner, that's where it gets difficult. The other thing I could suggest is that if your local authority, as a parent, if your local authority has an out of schools activities officer or an USO, out of schools officer, that would be the person, because most USO, certainly, I can only really speak for our local authority. I think that although Lados don't take complaints from the parents and public, some Lados will, if something comes in, they may respond to that person and say, we will, we'll pass this on to the most appropriate person, or we'll do whatever we, think. Different Lados are different. We certainly don't take complaints or speak to members of the public in our Lado role, but the out of schools officer will. And most out of schools officers are, or certainly, again, I can only really speak for Bradford, but are employed within the education sector
and
within education safeguarding.
Yeah, the local safeguarding board for your county might be another really good place to start if you're a parent and you've got an organisation that is a sole
the sole trader,
teacher, and without any other structural support around them.
Yeah, so there is the partnership as to whether they could do anything as perhaps another way. It would depend very much on the individual, because obviously it's case by case basis, isn't it? Depending on what the concerns are and what the complaint is, and how serious, in inverted commas, at that, because they're all serious, but it might be something of a very, as Steve doesn't like it, low level, but it may be something like that can actually be resolved in a different way. It very much depends what it is. If it's a more serious complaint and you have concerns about that owner, that they are abusing children or harming children, then report it to the police. That's the other, if it's something like that. But there are other avenues. To say the out of schools, we've found our out of schools activities officer certainly is brilliant with things like that. Now, they don't investigate, but what they will do is they will approach that dance school, and we liaise very closely with our out of schools officer. So if we get something like this, if we do get a complaint, and if we get an email to our Lado mailbox that says, I'm a parent and I'm complaining about this person, we would go to our out of schools officer and say, this is the concern. Obviously, if it's a serious concern, we would respond to the person. It's always very difficult as well responding to personal emails, because we don't ordinarily, because we don't know who that person is. We could be talking to anyone. We could be talking to the abuser. So it's very difficult to respond to emails from Hotmail accounts and things like that. It's not very safe.
That's really key. I mean, the interesting thing is that, is it possible, if you're worried about your child and your child is under the protection of their child's school, to report it to the school and saying, I'm worried about my child?
You could, but the school, but it's a separate entity, because unless you're worried about your child at that school, do you mean as in their daytime school, education school? Yeah. It would be, again, it would just be another step in the ladder, because the school themselves obviously have no affiliation, no control, no nothing over a dance school.
Unless that activity is taking place on the premises of the school, in which case the school is hiring that premises out and would have reason to be able to contact them and potentially be the DSL for that situation.
They could, but whether they would or not is another matter. There is now, obviously, recently, well, say fairly recently, there's something coming in relation to if they are a school that hires out their thing, then they have to make sure that the person hiring is following the same safeguarding procedures. So they have that addition now, which they never used to have to do that it was literally you hire it out and they do whatever. It's not my responsibility. They do have the responsibility in terms of making sure that they have safeguarding policies and that they are following the same safeguarding policies as the school. So the school themselves could say, we're no longer, you know, we have had concerns raised about you. We are no longer going to allow you to use our premises. But that wouldn't then solve the problem about the concern in the first instance. And the behaviour. So, but there are other avenues. I say the out of school education, you know, if you're out of school, most local authorities have somebody who is in that role to a greater or lesser degree. We're quite advanced. Certainly, I think we're quite advanced in Bradford because our out of schools officer is very much involved in other things outside of school activities. He gets involved, our team gets involved in these as well. I have a couple of dance school ones at the moment, and he's very closely linked into them. So
thank you, Dawn.
That's great. Thank you, Dawn.
Welcome.
So we have another question that's come in. If a teacher has their membership terminated because an allegation of misconduct related to safeguarding was upheld, and the DBS was informed but did not place them on a barred list, and if they have no other memberships, how will their conduct be addressed? And is there a case for doing other remedial work with that member? I mean, I would say instinctively that member, if they're terminated, they're not a member anymore, and it you know, that would be a question for the membership body to ponder the termination if they wanted to do the remedial work, or if that person was open to the remedial work. But over to you, Peter.
Yes, that's really interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, the DBS will have certain thresholds at which they put on the barred list, and an organisation will have their own thresholds as to what they think the professional conduct for that member of that organisation to have. So they can therefore still carry on with regulated activity because they're not barred from regulated activity. So they could act independently, but the fact that they did have IDTA against the name, but they don't have any more would be maybe noticed. But there is nothing to stop anybody running a dance school freelance without any affiliations at all. And if they're not barred from the DBS, then basically there's nothing that can be done. All I can say is if they work to another organisation, that organisation should be asking the question: have you ever been barred from a dance organisation as part of its conditions of membership? There you go. And as for remedial work, no, the organisation that had barred them has basically broken the contract and not broken, has ended the contract. There is no more contact between the two, I would say.
Yes, so it's just on the membership organisation to decide whether they want to suspend and review or terminate, I guess, in that scenario.
Yeah, and the only appeal anybody could have for that would be a judicial review because they're not answerable to anybody else, an awarding body.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, at this point, we don't have any other questions that are being asked or scenarios. So we've got
Shall I just
half a dozen final
a few things? Yes,
final points. Do you want to go for it, Peter?
Yes, I will, because there are a few points I thought if these aren't raised, I'll mention them at the end because I think it's important. One thing we've heard is an anonymous allegation to a LADO makes it very, very hard for LADO to act. So I think LADOs must encourage people that, and it's interesting what Dawn said, that they don't take contacts from the general public. So in fact, if you are somebody who is a dance teacher, then you shouldn't refer yourself anonymously, refer allegations to the LADO. You do need to actually say who you are. You can ask for advice without giving anything away, but if you want to actually refer to a LADO, you have to use names. It was very clear that one of the real reasons to start this conversation was we were worried that some associations may be thinking of passing detailed allegations amongst themselves. Now, they could do an information sharing agreement, but it's a very dangerous thing to do because they may not have a good reason to share information. So look at the ICO rules, which are referenced in our document, to see whether you think it's appropriate. If it's a statement of fact that you've struck somebody off, you can have their name and you can send that to somebody else, because and if that's part of your own GDPR privacy notice that you will tell other people if you've been struck off, that's fine. If it's an unproven allegation, I wouldn't do that. So be very careful.
Could you say that, if you don't say what the allegation is, but you could say that you are investigating somebody, is that a statement of fact, Peter?
May see whether there's anybody on the call who would do that, because what would worry me is that the very existence of you saying that, even if it's not been upheld or investigated, there's an implication in you saying that.
Yes, there is. That's
And
why I'm
so
asking the awkward question.
I wouldn't do that, because just saying someone under investigation with the old no smoke without fire theory, you could easily be sued by the person that you said that about, because it was unproven. So I wouldn't do that. I'd say it's best for everyone's safeguarding policy and procedures and training to include what we've talked about today, about information sharing and about their policies and procedures for membership, and having an adult safeguarding policy. Erin put in the chat link to the Ancraft Trust. That's a really good resource there. We talked about self-declaration form. Yes, and we talked about you can pass on a statement of fact, but don't do anything other than that. There we go. Hopefully we've covered everything. The document is available for everybody on our website. If anybody is on the call who hasn't joined Safer Dance, there's no fee. We don't have a bank account. We are just a group of people working to support the growth of dance in a safe way. So we want people to enjoy dance, but we want everybody to do it safely. So feel free to contact me. Just click on the website link there, and it'll email. There's a contact form to email me at Roehampton University, and I will add you. Thank you. We're at 93 members at the moment.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much, Peter. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We really hope that this was useful. We'd really appreciate some feedback and any things, suggestions for any other things that you'd like to hear more about, or conversations you'd like us to have that will help you in your practice. So please do look at our resources if you have questions, and please do be in touch and give us all the feedback that you would wish to share. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Oh, and there's a shameless plug for the DBS Spring Conference, everybody in the chat just now.
Yeah. Erin could stop recording.